Back in the day when I worked in local news, we would do a lot of, really important investigative stories. And we'd also do this genre of story that I would call things we noticed on the way into work. Like one of the stories that got pitched, no joke, was why hasn't the grass in the median in front of the TV station been mowed for a very long time? But another story that got pitched by a reporter, and we actually did, was why has this old green Ford just been abandoned on the side of the road and sitting there for 7 weeks?
Yeah, in fact, we saw a green Ford sitting on the Billy Graham Parkway near our station for 7 weeks.
7 weeks.
7 weeks it was there. Okay,
Sounds kind of absurd, but actually I can't blame the reporter totally for this one, because once you started seeing one abandoned car on a highway in North Carolina, you start seeing them in a lot of places, especially in cities. In fact, the story broadened out into,
Well, why do those abandoned cars sit there for so long, folks? Have you ever wondered this while you drive by and you see the same car or truck, that orange sticker on it day after day, just sitting there on the side of the road?
Yeah, we do too, right?
Yeah.
In fact,
now, in the process, we didn't really ever get to the bottom of the root cause of why all these cars were abandoned. I mean, I haven't actually found any scholarly research on this. One thing that I have read is that over the summer, some cars just tend to overheat because it's hot and they're sitting in traffic. But the Green Ford story, not the only story that's been done about abandoned cars.
What's the deal? Cars abandoned along the side of the road. Sometimes it feels like they're there forever. Like this one, and this one up here, and that one, and this one.
In fact, the North Carolina Highway Patrol gets 3,000 or 4,000 complaints every year about abandoned cars on the side of the highway. But there is this other thing that a lot of people notice, and they're not really quite sure what it means or what it's supposed to mean. In a lot of these abandoned cars, they notice that there is a white bag sticking out of the window, or maybe it's like a white shirt or a handkerchief or a towel or rag or something. Maybe it's tied to the door handle. Many people do this. So I got curious about this old analog kind of signal, especially because people in the year of our Lord 2024 are now making TikToks and Instagram reels about it. One guy who goes by the name North Carolina Carey, he's the former North Carolina Museum of History TikTok guy, had this whole running gag where he was like, I'm so jacked that I went for a drive and I remembered my white shirt, and then he puts it in his car window and walks away. And then months later, he made a follow-up TikTok where he came back for his abandoned car with the white shirt in the window. Obviously, he was onto something there, because each one of those Instagram reels got about 3 million views apiece and hundreds of comments. So, why is this a thing? Why is this happening? Where did it come from? And what is it supposed to mean? Well, for that, I ended up doing a lot more research than I thought into the origin of the white rag on the door. And I found out it may no longer mean what you think it means. This is the North Carolina Rabbit Hole Podcast. I'm Jeremy Markovich. So, the first thing I wanted to figure out was, is this just a North Carolina thing? So I looked into it, and believe it or not, in the most recent edition of the North Carolina Driver's Handbook, which is the thing they give to teenagers who have to learn the rules of the road, in that book, there is a section on page 62 that reads, quote, if a vehicle breakdown forces you to stop, move far off the road, tie a white cloth on the radio aerial or left door handle, and raise the hood. Now, there is a little bit of a clue here that this is not a new thing and that it mentions a radio aerial. New cars have not really had big, tall radio antennas for quite a while. So, went back even further. I actually found an old scanned driver's handbook from North Carolina from 1951. And aside from the fact that it shows some people smoking and other people rolling around with no seatbelts on in a giant convertible, there is no mention of this white cloth. So, it has not been around since the birth of automotive time, at least not in official handbooks. From there, I broadened out from handbooks to driver's ed films. I ended up stopping that research for a very simple reason. I am a bit squeamish, and these are the names of the first driver's ed films that came up when I searched for them. Mechanized Death, Highways of Agony, and Wheels of Tragedy. Those are real, and they use real, gruesome accident scene footage to scare teenagers straight. I decided from my mental health that I was not going to keep going down that particular rabbit hole. But kept on doing research, and I found that this has its origins all the way back in the beginnings of a very, very important road, the Pennsylvania Turnpike.
This is the story of America's superhighway pioneer, the Pennsylvania Turnpike, a great link between the East and the West.
Now, I know this is the North Carolina podcast, but, if you want to get to the bottom of things, sometimes you got to leave the state, right? So this is what happened. Back during the Great Depression, a lot of states were having a very hard upgrading or building new roads and bridges. The economy was hurting, tax collections were down, and there just wasn't enough money sitting around to be able to do this. And it was during that time that somebody came up with this idea. They said, what if we basically made a road into an investment? So stay with me here. The way that local and state governments can get money that they don't currently have on hand is to sell bonds. It's kind of like a mortgage, right? But it's the government's version of a mortgage. And they said, we're going to sell bonds for roads. But if we're not making a lot of tax money, how are we going to pay those bonds back? Well, the answer, we will charge a toll on that road. And we'll take all that toll money and it'll pay back the investors who bought the bonds. And that is how we're going to build these spiffy new roads. But you just can't build any road and ask people to pay to drive on the road, right? They're going to go, what's in it for me? Well, in Pennsylvania's case, they said, we are going to engineer the most beautiful, sweeping, safe road that we can. And also, it'll be a long road, and it'll be high speed, so you can get from city to city faster than you ever have before. That is the benefit of driving on this toll road, which we're going to call a turnpike.
The turnpike is a part of the American free enterprise system. It is paid for only by those who use it.
And in Pennsylvania, that is what they created. The first 160-mile section of turnpike opened in 1940, and the idea was this big smash hit. After World War II, other states started copying the idea. Ohio, West Virginia, New York, New Jersey, Texas, Oklahoma, Indiana, they all started opening turnpikes, charging tolls, and offering the same thing. In fact, this divided highway became the template for pretty much the entire interstate system that sprung up in the 50s, 60s, and 70s.
Pennsylvanians are proud that their state holds the distinction of breathing initial life into modern highway construction.
But there was a problem. If you're going to make a high-speed road, people are not necessarily going to obey the speed limit. Now, believe it or not, when they opened the Pennsylvania Turnpike, the original speed limit was 70 miles per hour, which today does not seem like much, but back in the day was like really screaming fast. And this is also back in the day when most cars did not have seatbelts, definitely did not have airbags. The dashboards were metal, the steering wheels may have been metal, like really, really, really hard. And what you had was some people going above the speed limit, 80 miles an hour, 90, 100 miles an hour, and then losing control and then crashing in spectacular, dangerous fashion. And so very early on, people started saying that this road that is supposed to be the safest in the world is not actually as safe as you said it was going to be. Seems pretty dangerous. So the first thing the Pennsylvania Turnpike Commission did was they did nothing. They actually commissioned a survey that said, you know who's to blame for all of this? People who don't know how to drive right? Like it was literally human error. But this clamor over safety just kept going throughout the 1950s, and in 1960, they finally lowered the speed limit to 65. But they also put a lot of police out to enforce this new speed limit. And wouldn't you know, people slowed down and accidents went down. But over that time before that, in the 1950s, people were just hauling ass down the Pennsylvania Turnpike and wrecking all the time. And there was another issue. The cars.
During the year, as many as 60,000 motorists will have mechanical difficulty with their cars.
Back in the day, people were pushing their cars to go really fast over very long distances, and fairly often those old cars would break down or maybe blow an engine. And the first advice was, hey, driver, it's your fault. Fix up your car, get it in better shape before you drive in on our turnpike. But just like the speed limit, eventually the turnpike had to address this idea that people were breaking down on a road where other people were flying past them at dizzying speeds. So what the Turnpike Commission did was they said, we're going to offer roadside service. But that led to yet another problem, which was, how do you tell who should get roadside service? Like, how do you signal that you need help and other people don't need help? Because back in the day, parking wasn't necessarily illegal on the side of the highway. Folks would pull off to sleep, they would pull off to rest, take it easy for a moment. They would pull off to sightsee. They would pull off to have a picnic. And there needed to be a way to signal to police that you were having an emergency and not just having lunch. So in the 50s, the Pennsylvania Turnpike at some point, I cannot tell you exactly when, but they started giving out official advice at toll booths and in brochures, and they said, if you need help, pull off the road, get out a white cloth, and put it in between the window and the door frame, and then just stay in your car and wait.
The white flag is the distress signal on the turnpike. It will be spotted by turnpike patrols who will offer assistance and then contact the service unit assigned to the area.
And pretty soon, all of these turnpikes started doing the exact same thing. Ohio did it, West Virginia did it, New York made it a thing. New Jersey, by the way, did not do this because they had actually made all parking illegal on the side of the road, and they thought the white cloth thing was kind of redundant. But everybody else copied this, and it became a thing to the point where in 1962, the American Association of State Highway Officials, a very powerful sort of policy-setting group that sets standards for roads and drivers, got together and decreed that the official national signal that you are having car trouble and need help is to put a white cloth on your door handle and raise your hood. And after that, this whole white rag thing took off. It entered into drivers' handbooks, it became the subject of advice columns and news articles, and over time, it just became this thing that people sort of just instinctually knew. Like, maybe they remembered to do it, but they just couldn't remember where they heard it from. It was just something you were supposed to do if your car was on the side of the road. And that leads us to today. The white cloth thing, white rag thing, whatever you want to call it, is not used nearly as often as it used to be, for a very simple reason. That kind of makes sense. If you break down on the side of the road, you're not just going to sit in your car and wait for somebody to come and notice. You're probably going to get on your cell phone and call the police or a tow truck or call a friend or family member to come get you. And in that last case, you might end up saying, all right, well, you know what I'll do? I will come back later and I'll figure it out. But people are still putting these white things in the windows. And online, there is this persistent question of what it is supposed to mean in modern day. And one of the things that people say in response is that this is actually sort of like a way to signal to the police that, hey, okay, my car is here for now, but I'm going to come back and get it. So just don't tow it. It is kind of like casting a magic spell to ward off the highway patrol, right? Well, no. In North Carolina, that is not how police officially interpret this. If a trooper sees your car on the side of the road and you are not in it, they are supposed to slap an orange sticker on your window, regardless of whether you have a white cloth on it, and then you have a day or two to come get it before the patrol has it towed. So, sorry. Even so, the white shirt thing is this old school traffic-related cheat code that still works in North Carolina and beyond. Now, hopefully you will never have a need to use it, but the next time you see it, now you know that people are just out there following tradition and not just out to lunch. That is our show. If you like this episode, we have a lot more here on this feed about things you might be interested in. And if you're really interested in even more than that, I would highly suggest that you subscribe to my newsletter. It is reader supported. It is free if you want it to be. Put out one a week, and you can sign up at ncrabbithole.com. That is ncrabbithole.com. Also, if you enjoyed this episode, please leave a good review or 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever it is that you listen. It really helps people find the show. I'm Jeremy Markovich. I'll see you next time.